Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Wandering Road podcast. I'm your host Chris, alongside my co-host Dean. It is September, so we're getting into spooky season, and today we're going to be talking about sleep paralysis, the night hag, and night terrors. You ready for this one, man?
As long as you're not pissed off at me, because okay, we're going to tell people what happened. So essentially, I dropped a stupid amount of money, which is essentially $100 on Steam, because I bought the full package of the new Starfield game by Bethesda. I've been really looking forward to them. Dude, lay it on me, man. I don't give a fuck. I picked up Fallout 3 in an old ass GameStop in like 2009 or something. I had no idea what Fallout was. I had no idea who Bethesda was. I picked it up in a bargain bin. Fallout 3 to this day is beyond my favorite game ever, because like the open world expansion, the storyline, the playability of it, like I still play Fallout 3 to this day. And I wish they'd make a remake. So I love Bethesda, even all the shit they put us through with all kinds of other games and stuff. So I dropped $100 fucking on Starfield today, and it's the first day of launch, and it's a great game so far. But the funny thing that happened is I was playing it, like I was like 5 minutes into creating my character, and then my supervisor for my company calls me, which he's a great guy and all. Love that guy. Good job. However, we went into a really deep conversation about our yearly performance evaluation and all this stuff. And I'm thinking like, I got to get on top of this raise possibility. So like, I'm so focused on having this conversation with him for like an hour and 20 minutes. And I realize I'm 20 minutes late for this podcast, and my Starfield game on Steam is still open. So my friend Chris here is probably thinking this motherfucker is playing Starfield and ignoring the shit out of me right now. Meanwhile, I'm on the call with my supervisor trying not to shit a brick. So here we are. That's the story out of the way.
Bastard, you were playing
I know,
Starfield
I'm so
the whole time.
I was playing the whole time, man. What are you going to fucking do? No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
I wasn't. I swear to God, I was. I will show. I can show you. I will screenshot my timestamp of Starfield. Actually, that won't show you shit. That'll just show you that I was on pause for the last 2 hours.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, fuck it. Let's go to the podcast. So this is a really exciting one because I don't really know how to feel about this. It's kind of freaky to me. I'm sure you've had some crazy stories about sleep paralysis and all that stuff too, but you have way more information about demons than I do, at least being, like Catholic and whatnot. So maybe we can get into this whole conversation about how the paranormal might affect humans' sleep.
But first, I think we should define what sleep paralysis is. I know it sounds self-explanatory, but there's always folks that are not familiar with it. So, sleep paralysis, by definition, is a phenomenon that occurs when a person temporarily experiences an inability to move or speak while falling asleep or waking up. It can be accompanied by vivid hallucinations or a feeling of a presence in the room, which some people describe as a sleep paralysis demon or sleep demon. These experiences can be frightening and unsettling and often lead to feelings of terror and anxiety. And that is where we get the night hag from.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are night hags sexy, or are they not sexy?
They are not. They are not something that you want to encounter. Hence the term hag. They're always old and decrepit, and they have like long gray stringy hair. Some have like red eyes. Yeah, right. Warts, like green skin. And it varies from culture to culture, which is the interesting thing about this. It's that for, I would say, centuries, even maybe thousands of years, that these different cultures across the globe that probably never had any type of contact with one another, they all have some sort of sleep demon or some sort of hag they attribute to sleep paralysis.
So here's the thing about human nature, my friend. I feel like anybody who goes through a perfectly natural experience of sleep paralysis will have some kind of like hallucinogenic dream. They're more likely to see something that they don't want to see, because that's just human nature. Like, you don't want to deal with shit that is like dangerous or like stuff that you're not really wanting to experience, because like life was really hard and really dangerous for a lot of people, a lot of human beings for many, many thousands of years. So I think the natural inclination is seeing something you don't want to see, hence seeing someone who's super ugly. With that said, with that concept of it being purely natural and maybe being hallucinogenic in terms of your own brain and what you want to see versus not want to see like some kind of like old hag sitting on your chest with gross hair. You have no idea, like you don't want to touch her. So gross. So do you think that this type of hag, this type of spirit is real? Or do you think it's purely imagined by the human psyche over thousands of years?
So let me put it this way. It could be real because there are people that, let's say, for example, a little kid has never heard of sleep paralysis, has never heard of a night hag, does not know what that is. What you're not going to do as a parent is tell your kid about the night hag, you know? And these people that have never encountered, like these children and whatnot that have encountered the night hag, they all describe it to be the same type of thing, this old, decrepit type of woman-looking creature that either sits at the edge of their bed or sits directly on their chest, and they feel like the life draining out of them.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that kind of throws like a curveball into this, because yeah, I think logically you could say like human beings as a collective, we share the same type of phobias and fears throughout human history just because of the nature of how our civilizations grew, right? Because at some point, you'll realize the hunter and gathering tribe, right? One of those poor bastards will learn very quickly that the berry that you ate, you're not supposed to eat. And you're not supposed to touch that snake. You're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to do that. And you're not supposed to wander off alone in the dark, which I think that's why human beings have an innate fear of the dark, because back in the day when there was no electricity, there's just your campfire. If you wandered off alone, we know that predators lurk in the dark, type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, I totally agree with you. Like I think that everything that we experience to a certain degree is based off of past human experiences, whether it's embedded in our DNA or if it's coming from hundreds of years of storytelling. But I don't disagree for a second that there are very strange things in this world where a person or something has no connection to some story or some recollection from human history, yet they still have an experience that is detailed by stories like, say, the night hag. So I think that like going back to stories about like the night hag, or even just like more modern examples of alien abduction, there are things in our past some people experience who don't have a tie to that story in their past, and like, you know, it doesn't exist in terms of human history. I think a lot of human beings do have experiences that are unexplainable, and of course some of them are explainable in terms of like how we explain things from a human perspective in our stories and whatnot. But I think at the same time, there, like you said, examples of kids like just not having any basis for explaining what a hag looks like, a night hag looks like from sleep paralysis perspective, yet they still talk about it as being a real thing. So that is very curious. And I'll tell you a quick story that happened to me. My first ever, and I know I've told this in past podcasts before, but I'll reiterate. In my past experience, my first experience in sleep paralysis, I basically heard a snake, like a rattlesnake, chittering, like its tail shaking, like, and I woke up and I couldn't move my body. I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and I was sleeping over at my aunt's house. My mom was gone on some trip, which she never really did before, so that was new to me. And I think that was part of it, like my mom being gone and like being in a new place, sleeping in a new bed, and it was really like freaky. But I remember waking up and hearing a rattlesnake as I was coming to out of my sleep. I honestly, at that point in my life, I had probably never heard a rattlesnake outside of a TV show or some cartoon. So the fact that I dreamt of a rattlesnake having bit me, being paralyzed and like not knowing what to do and just being terrified, not being able to move, thinking like, oh shit, this is it. Like I got bit by a snake, no idea what to do. I can't move. I heard a rattle, like I heard a chitter. And what happens now? And then like 2 minutes later, my brain fully came online and I was able to move, and I frantically looked all over my body, no rattlesnake bite, and I was fine. Never got bit by a snake to this day. So that is just an example about like how human beings can experience sleep paralysis and how it can be false. So what's your perspective on that?
I have a question for you. You said you heard the rattlesnake. Did you felt like something bite you, or you thought it bit you?
I never felt a bite. All I remember is waking up, being unable to move, and like 3 seconds later, after having that realization, like, oh shit, I can't move, I heard a rattlesnake's tail shaking. Never saw it, never felt the bite. After hearing that rattlesnake shaking its tail and realizing I can't move, like 4 seconds later, my first thought after that was, I got bit by a snake. I'm poisoned. I'm going to die. I can't move.
Right, right. Were you always afraid of snakes as a kid?
I wasn't. That's the weird thing. Like
okay.
I had no, I still to this day, you tell me a snake, if it bit me, even if it had fangs and it bit me, if it won't kill me, I will still pick it up. I am not afraid of bites. I am not afraid of getting stung. What I am afraid
I'm
of
a little bitch when it comes to that stuff.
Okay.
So you have fun with that. If we encounter a snake, you go ahead and pick it up. I'll let you do that.
Hey, Mr. Beast, pay me $1 million. I'll pick up a deadly snake. But no, seriously. No, like
you pick up a black mamba. It's like,
oh god damn it! You get bit, and like 3 minutes later you're dead. But here's $1 million.
Right?
No. I honestly, like, my mantra as a person is I will try it 1 time or 2 times most, even if I don't like it, as long as it won't kill me, as long as it won't maim me, as long as it doesn't threaten to like incapacitate me, I will try it. So like handling a snake that will bite me, yeah, sure, it might bite me or sting me or whatever, but as long as it doesn't kill me or end my life, like or like disrupt my life, then I will totally touch it.
Yeah, but that's an interesting one. I can't answer this because I'm not a psychologist, so I don't have a deeper psychological understanding of a kid's mind.
Right.
But for you to not be afraid of snakes, and then all of a sudden you think, holy crap, there's one here and it probably bit me.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting concept I never really thought about. But since you shared one, I'll share the only experience I had with sleep paralysis. This was when I first started this show. Like, it was probably a couple months in before I fully brought you on as a co-host. I think this was a couple episodes after your AI episode, right? So through our catalog of episodes that we have, I think we're pushing 27 this Friday. So at the beginning, I was doing like a lot of creepy episodes on my own, like La Llorona, the Black Eyed Children, and all this stuff. And one night I was laying in bed. It was probably, I don't know, it had to be maybe 12:30 at night when this happened. So I'm laying in bed. I can show you because we're on camera right now, but the way I was angled, so if you see my face right now, like it was like pointed downward towards my left shoulder because I sleep on my left side. My eyes were tilted downward, and I woke up. I couldn't move. I could move my eyes. I felt like this presence near me. And no, it wasn't any of my animals.
Yeah.
So I hear my dog breathing above my head. He was on top of my pillow. My wife is laying down next to me. I can hear her breathing, and I just can't move. And I keep thinking to myself, I don't know why, but if for whatever reason, I pick up my head, I'm going to see something that I don't want to see.
Oh shit.
Yeah. And in my head, I kept saying a prayer in my head. Like when I started saying a prayer in my head, after reciting it a couple times, like I could slowly start moving. I started to move my legs a little bit, but I did not move my head from that position. Because even though I got my motion back, it felt like whatever was there was still there. Yeah. And to me, I can't say that was a night hag or anything like that because I didn't feel anything on my chest, I didn't feel any type of pressure. I didn't feel like anything drained. I didn't feel drained the next morning. I think it was one of those situations where I was so entrenched in talking about paranormal stuff and researching paranormal stuff and doing it all on my own, that within my subconscious, it just manifested itself, if that makes sense.
I think that's totally possible. And even likely, because like that's one thing I wonder about people who experience these things, who are like experiencing paranormal stuff. Like, you have to ask yourself, what were you watching? What were you thinking about? Even just like a week earlier. And people have such a short memory, which is understandable. Like I have a short memory, relatively speaking. Like my short-term memory is shit now. It used to be really good, but right now my short-term memory is just obliterated because I have a family, I have a child, I have a small child. And I still remember to this day, one of my old professors years and years ago saying something to our class like, oh, like when you have a kid, your short-term memory goes out the window or something like that. And I remember thinking at the time, like, my short-term memory is really fucking good right now. I don't think it's going to be affected by a kid. No, my short-term memory is fucking gone. Like, I can't remember things that I ate like a day ago. And I used to be able to remember like, oh, I ate this last month on this day. Now I can't even remember what I ate like 24 hours ago. So I think that people who might be experiencing media or movies or something, who might not be thinking about even watching at that moment, like they might be more susceptible to having a dream about like something that's like terrifying or a nightmare or something like that. So I'm not saying like, you personally in that situation, you didn't experience something real that's terrifying, but like you said, it might have been based off of something you experienced recently. So, or in that
No. We're going to say that shit was not real, and it was just a manifestation of the work that I was doing for this show, because I don't want it to be.
I know. That's another way to approach the situation. Like, it's fucking not real. So I will say, like, what do you remember? What research in particular you were doing that freaked you out the most? If you thought back to that moment about doing research, is there anything that you thought of, like even like for a split second, like something that took your breath away or gave you a pit in your stomach about reading about some spirit or entity or something like that?
Yeah, I can tell you exactly which one. The Weeping Woman. And I'm not going to say the name in Spanish.
Okay. Well, can you tell the story about it? Because it sounds interesting as fuck. I don't know what the Weeping Woman is.
God damn it. Okay.
Just pass it on me, man. Just as long as it doesn't affect my family, it just affects me. Just fucking tell me, because I can.
I mean, it doesn't help because you live on an island surrounded by the fucking Pacific Ocean, but good luck.
Exactly.
Because it's related to water. So the Weeping Woman story, real quick. There was this woman in, like, I don't know, 19th century or 18th century Mexico who was married to this rich landowner, and he married her because she was like young and super pretty, and she ended up having like 2 of his kids. And then there are multiple variations of the story, but the common one is that she was walking down the road and saw him in a horse and carriage with a younger woman, and he basically said that you need to get the fuck out because she's younger and prettier, and I don't want anything to do with you anymore. So in her grief, she went home, took their 2 little boys, dragged them to the nearest body of water, which was a river, and drowned them in her grief and anger. And after she realized what she'd done, she started weeping and crying, saying like, "Ay mis hijos," which stands for "oh my children" or "oh my sons." And she would wander up and down the riverbank, not eating until, like, she essentially starved herself to death. Right. And she got to the gates of heaven, and St. Peter said, "what did you do to your kids?" And she said what she did, and she was banished to roam the earth forever as a punishment. And the story goes that if you hear her wailing and weeping, saying "ay mis hijos," and she sounds far away, that means she's actually close to you. But if her weeping sounds close to you, that means she's far away. Yeah, that's kind of the story. That's the main research I was doing at the time when I had my sleep paralysis experience. And on top of that, I watched the movie The Nun, which is kind of creepy on its own.
That's what did it. Yes.
I think this is the first time you and I both had experiences about a paranormal topic that we're talking about, which is, I think this is a first, which is pretty cool.
One thing that pops out from the conversation we just had, you were saying how this story about the wailing woman or, crying woman or whatever from Hispanic culture, that actually reminds me of a story that I heard traveling Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia. And it's not just Indonesia. It's also, if I'm correct, there was also a movie called The Wailing on Netflix. Have you ever seen The Wailing? There was a South Korean movie.
No, but I'll have to check that out. Is it the same premise?
It's kind of along the same lines, but like you should check out, if you haven't seen The Wailing and you like horror movies, you have to see The Wailing. Like it is such a really mind fuck movie. It's like the South Korean version of Hereditary. It's such a mind fuck. It's a really, really good movie that'll keep you guessing. But it reminds me of this concept that comes from all kinds of Southeast Asian countries and probably from all over the world, from what it sounds like. This idea that a woman, could potentially in her own grief drown her own children, or lose her child, or lose some child in some tragic accident that has to do with water, and then roam the planes of existence, like right beyond the realm of our own existence in three-dimensional space, to haunt people and to terrorize people and to maybe even kill people. But in Indonesia, they have a similar story called The Wailing Woman, and it comes from like Javanese and Sudanese culture and tradition. And from what I remember about it, I think her name was like Monyet Satan or like something like that. But like she essentially, from what I remember, I probably have this wrong, but like she lost her children. She was carrying a child or more than one child, and she suffered some fatal injury that was either the result of some man or like somebody. And her child was lost, and she was bereft with sorrow. She killed herself, right? Or like she died in grief, or she killed herself. I don't remember which one. Maybe there's multiple stories. But when she came back to haunt this reality, she basically had an empty hole in her stomach. So a black bottomless pit in her gut. So if you saw her, the way you would know it was her is because she had hair draped over her face, long hair, wearing a white gown. But the signifying aspect of her was that she had a black bottomless pit where she was carrying her child. And I'll never forget to this day, man. I had a friend of mine when I was traveling to Indonesia. He was from Indonesia, and he told me about this story about this wailing woman, and he's like, dude. And remember, we're really young, so I'm really naive and like whatever. But he's like, dude, if you ever hear this sound, you need to run away. And the sound he told me was like this. If you were ever taking a shower or like doing something and you're a man and you heard that sound behind you, you need to fucking run, because that bitch is trying to kill you because she is angry. That is just.
But if you're in the shower, what the fuck are you going to do?
I know what you're going to do.
Dude,
just keep washing your hair.
I know we got a little bit off track, but I promise we'll get on track. Dude, Asian mythology and demons and stuff like this freak me the fuck out. And I absolutely love it. It's terrifying. It is really terrifying. I feel like we should do a revisiting of the weeping woman or the wailing woman and just look at it from different cultures across the world to see what the similarities are.
Yep.
With their stories, because it's always someone and related to children somehow losing children, which is really interesting, because this is in Indonesia. Right. What person from Indonesia is transplanting this story to frickin' 1600s Mexico?
Exactly.
Or vice versa, or even earlier than that.
Here's the terrifying fact of human reality, my friend. And this is something we don't want to hear, because the unfortunate fact of human nature is that kids, like they either through the hands of their own parents or someone else, they pass away, they die, they get killed. And no one wants to talk about it, because especially if you're a parent, and I fucking have a lot of trouble talking about it right now. Just for an example, my wife, for the first time in my personal life, showed me the Joy Luck Club, which is, so my wife is Asian. she's Vietnamese. She grew up in that culture of coming to America and being exposed to racism and challenges. Her family came over here dirt poor. They lived in a shitty cockroach filled apartment for like 4 or 5 years before they even had a chance to move into a house rental. So they, like, my wife knows what it means to grow up super poor and struggle as an Asian in America. And you know that too. I see you shaking your head. Like, you have family, you know, yourself being non-Caucasian and have family come over here and deal with all this shit or whatever. But like, just the fact that my wife showed me that movie, and I had no idea about that. And in that movie, there was a scene, one of the women who was telling their story before she came from China to America, and this is based off a true story. One of the women ended up like being in an abusive relationship with a really handsome man who gave her a son, but that man unfortunately went off and had sex with all kinds of different women and, like, you know, venereal diseases, and like just completely neglecting her. And she was so distraught because she thought that she was in love with him. She thought that he loved her. But at the end of the day, after the story, like, she realized, oh, he's just a womanizer. He just wants to have sex with whoever. He's all about himself. So her own child in the movie, who was her son, who's the son of this guy, the only son they had, she ended up drowning him in a tub of water when he was only like 1 or 2 years old. Just a little baby. And it was such a fucking hard scene for me to watch. I could not watch it because I have a daughter myself who's 2 years old. And I think that the fact that this movie came out in the early 90s and reflected, like, you know, the story of Chinese people coming over in the 80s, this is a story that just transcends human nature. And it's so unfortunate, but I think that it's a story that just crosses cultures, crosses times. And that is why we have so many stories about women hurting their children, drowning their children, women having kids that die, because it's so part of regular life as a human being. I don't know, man. Like, what do you think about like, I know that's really heavy, but like, do you have anything to add to that concept of just being the shitty fact of human nature?
Yeah, I think that's something that we overlook when we talk about paranormal cases, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that, you know, we're human beings and we have the same shared experiences, you know, with parenthood and, you know, tragedy and whatnot. And also experiencing what we consider to be the paranormal. I think that's overlooked, that, you know, human beings have a shared experience. Even though, you know, we're all culturally different, it's still a shared experience. And I want to segue into talking about the old hag or the sleep demon throughout different cultures. And since we were talking about Asia in general, I figured this would be the perfect segue to talk about the old hag. And so I'm going to completely butcher this, but in the Chinese culture, they call it, when it's translated to English, is ghosts pressing on body.
Yes. So I did not know that. Do they have the Chinese name for that in front of you?
Yeah, they do, but I can't pronounce it. I can try.
Can you spell it?
I'll spell it out for you. Yeah, it's GUI space YA space SHEN.
Yeah, that's Gui Ya Shen. Gui Ya Shen. Yeah, Gui Ya Shen. I think Gui, I'm not going to say shit because, like, I haven't studied Chinese in a long time, but I think Gui might be along the lines of like monster or something like that, but like, or like malevolent spirit. You know, in Fallout, the game Fallout, they have the Yao Guai.
Yeah.
So the Yao Guai, I can't remember what component of that, but there's some part of that is monster. So that sounds familiar to Gui Ya Shen. So I wonder if they see it as a monstrosity, which is a significant concept, because if they see it as a monster that is purely outside human nature and either from the spiritual realm or something outside of the human realm altogether. So that is interesting, because in, say, like Native American culture, they have the Wendigo, and the Wendigo is a creature that is kind of like a zombie or like a replicant, like a zombie, or like a not a zombie purely, but like a vampire in a way where So in Native American culture, they have a similar concept where the Wendigo is a monster. However, it is derived from a human being. So like, it's almost like a vampire, so to speak. So like when one vampire infects another, it becomes another vampire. Same with a Wendigo. So the Wendigo infects a person, a human being, a Native American spirit or whatever, like person who becomes another Wendigo. So maybe this is outside of that perspective where like a monster in Chinese culture is a monster. It doesn't go from human being to monster. It's always a monster. So maybe that is their perception of an old hag.
Throughout all of these cultures, they describe it as the same type of experience.
Mm-hmm.
They feel pressure on their chest, difficulty breathing, a sense of fear or dread. It's believed that, it's a nocturnal visitation by a ghost or spirit.
So I'm just curious, man. What do you like? You are, I think, like honestly, I think you are more spiritual and you believe more in this sort of thing than me. And that's not to say like I don't know shit. Like I'm not saying at all. Like I could be completely fucking wrong, and there
So
could be a
can
whole
I.
other. I know, but like at the same time, like I give more respect to your belief because like I used to believe like that, but the more I experienced, life and whatnot across different other realms or whatever, like I kind of grew away from that belief and I do miss it in a sense. So I will say that like I give more respect to how you believe in things and whatnot. So I just want to see like what do you think about that story? Like how do you think about human beings being affected by the other side in sleep states?
That's a really good question. Just in sleep states or in reference to?
I would say sleep states because we're focusing on talking about, well, I mean, I guess if you personally like, I mean, you and I believe that there's something more like that is our most baseline agreeance right now as human beings. So like we both agree that there's something more to our reality that we're not seeing and it's not measurable and it's completely variable and it's very mysterious. So I don't know what that means on my end, but you are more sure in your belief, I think, in your Christianity and your Catholicism and whatnot. So like, do you prescribe yourself more to the idea of like demons affecting us, like succubi, incubi, or do you think that there's still more of a human aspect to these experiences, like in sleep paralysis, than we are willing to admit from a paranormal experience?
So when it comes to sleep paralysis and sleep paralysis demons or the concept of it, I'm a little bit more balanced. And I think that there may be these entities that prey on you in your most vulnerable state for one reason or another. And I also think that you cannot discredit the psychological aspect of it as well. So to me, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can have you can use both as an explanation of why, someone is experiencing these bouts of sleep paralysis, if that makes sense. In one of my previous podcasts, I did an interview with Julie from Shades of Sinister, and she shared her sleep paralysis experience in which essentially she was in college and she was laying in bed, and I guess like their dorm room, there was like a door that connected the two rooms together. It was like one of those suite type of rooms, if you know what I'm talking about. So essentially she said that she was talking to her roommate who was standing in the doorway watching something on her laptop, and I guess she doesn't recall falling asleep, and then she wakes up and she sees the silhouette of her roommate standing in the doorway, and it starts moving to her and it starts contorting and shaping into this type of demon looking type of creature. And in her story, in her account, she said that like it started crawling up under her covers, and she doesn't know how she broke out of it, but she did, and she started actually punching whatever the hell it was. And when I asked her, like, did you feel like you were punching anything? You were hitting anything? And she said absolutely that she did. So Yeah, I don't really know what her religious beliefs are, but that's one situation where it's like, okay, is this a psychological thing or is there something more at play here, if that makes sense?
I have to say, whatever spirit you want to prescribe to, bless you for saying things like, oh, you were on a really famous person's podcast and you're calling out their possible fallacy or their possible misconception of the situation. I feel like most people would just be like, oh yeah, it was so crazy. Like this person actually had this happen to them. But here you are, kind of questioning the validity, not because you're questioning about the person's perspective and like what they're lying or not. You're just being a really good scientist, so to speak, because you're not subscribing yourself to one belief or another. So admiration to you for that, my friend.
Right. Yeah. And it was the perfect example to bring up because I believe her based off of, I've had family members that had sleep paralysis experiences and some have seen things, some haven't. Like my sister had sleep paralysis and she's seen things. My other cousin had sleep paralysis. He just never seen anything, but he just feels like really scared when he wakes up and he's in that sleep paralysis state because he can't move or anything like that. To use my friend's experience as an example, I think that's where you can draw like, okay, was this something psychological? Was she exhausted from being a college student or was there something more demonic at play for whatever particular reason?
And here's the crazy thing about human nature. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I feel like
it could be both.
You can have some spirit or some entity or some force having like applying something on you that is changing your physiology or changing your experience of the world. And your brain will probably create something different. And maybe the entity knows that. Maybe the entity knows like, oh, I don't have to present myself to it exactly as I am. Maybe I just need to do the thing that I want to do to this human being. And then it doesn't fucking matter what the human being sees me as or experiences me as. It can be, simultaneously both. Like the thing is creating the feeling to you, but you might be seeing it as like a purple monster. But in reality, it's like a demon red snake or something. Like it doesn't really matter what it looks like. It just matters what's happening to you physiologically.
Right, exactly. That's the way that I thought about it too. And I have to ask you, with that being said, with these like quote unquote old hag, do you think it's all the same thing if we're subscribing to the notion that this is real, right? So we're taking that perspective that this is real. Is it the same entity just doing its rounds on people that may be suffering psychologically or suffering through some issue in their lives that make them vulnerable? And that's why so many cultures across the world have the same description of what this thing is.
That's a really hard question. You know why? Because let me ask you a question. Just speaking purely from a human psychological perspective, is it more likely for you, Chris, as a person who doesn't have schizophrenia, who doesn't have serious psychological trauma, XYZ, is it more likely for you to see something hallucinogenic in your day-to-day life, or someone who has a brain that is wired to be more schizophrenic? Someone who has years of trauma, etc. It's a rhetorical question because we know that based off of human nature and human interaction and the way things that like neurologically how our brains are made, it's more likely for someone to have a serious mental illness to be hallucinogenic than someone who's not. So I would ask the same question, like someone who is under a greater degree of stress, who is more tied to one belief system religiously or something like that, is it more likely for them to have that experience that is really reticent or just like, just a good example of how human nature is to have sleep paralysis, to come up with something that is more spiritually related or hallucinogenically related? Because myself personally, like when I woke up, I told that story about waking up, thought I got bit by a snake, heard the rattlesnake, woke up, couldn't move when I was like 8 or 9. I believed in that moment that I was going to die. I believed that I got bit by a snake because I heard it as clear as day and I could not move. The only explanation to me as a child was I got bit by a snake. And it made sense. It makes sense because that's all I knew. I knew that snakes bite. I knew that snakes caused poison and paralysis. I knew that snakes caused death. And that is all I knew in that moment as an 8 or 9-year-old. But I have to wonder, people who prescribe themselves to one belief or another, giving into that totally human experience of paralysis, which I still have, like as an agnostic person, I still have sleep paralysis, but I don't believe in that instance that is like a spirit or something. I think it's just part of my body, like developing or having issues or something, or not functioning properly. I think that people, for the most part, and I say for the most part for a reason, because there's not 100% certainty here, for the most part, they fill that gap of human experience. So like, I think maybe 90% or 95% of people experience sleep paralysis in their lives at one point or another. And then they just fill in that gap with like religious basis or whatever. But I think 5% is probably like everything else, like alien abductions and experience. It's unexplainable. So I cannot say beyond a doubt that there isn't some spiritual side that is affecting us beyond that 5% or at that 5%. So that's just where I stand. Do you think that that percentage is higher, lower, or how do you feel about the idea that there could be many human beings who are experiencing the sleep paralysis or like, some kind of spiritual experience, but it's not necessarily derived from their own religion or religious belief?
So the percentage of people that might be experiencing that, I don't know. I can't really.
It's hard to say. It's really difficult to talk about.
Yeah, it really is hard to say because we're just taking into account, potentially people that believe in this stuff.
Right.
I would like to hear an account of, like an atheist or someone like that has an experience with this and sees something, because they have to fucking be out there. There's no fucking way that every single non-believer has never had some sort of sleep paralysis type of experience.
It's funny too, because we came across this same concept, the same question before in another podcast. It's like, how many people in another religious sect or even atheist sect had some kind of religious experience that supported that particular religion when they themselves did not believe it? So I think that is a really good question to have, but I would caution and say you always have to be careful and ask, what was that person's exposure to that religious narrative before they had it? So if a person knew about, Incubus or Sucubus or whatever like that,
Succubus.
Even if they didn't believe in it, Succubus, yeah. Even if they didn't believe in it beforehand, how might that affect their experience? And we're going off on a fucking tangent. What I want to talk about real quick before we run out of time is Incubus and Sucubus.
Succubus.
Like Succubus. What do you know about Incubus and Succubus?
So from what I know, I'm not looking at your cheat sheet. From what I know, I'm not looking at our notes. Don't worry. That essentially what they are demons that take the form of a male or female. The male is the incubus and the female is the succubus. And what they would do is come to people at night and have sexual encounters with them, which is really fucking gross. But and essentially what that would do is drain their life force. So whether they are physically engaging in that act with the person or they're putting them in a paralysis type of state where in their mind they're dreaming about having this liaison with this I guess divine looking person, right. Some sort of goddess or something like that, that will then drain their life. So that's what I know about the succubus and the incubus.
Yeah, I think I think that's spot on. And I think that the crazy thing about that story or that concept is imagine like 1,000 years ago, right? Like human beings didn't even have pornography, probably even until like 100 years ago, right? So you're talking about tens of thousands of
dude, those ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs were wild, man. I promise we'll get back on track, but they're like the History Channel used to be so wild back in the day. They had this like documentary series called like, I don't know, Ancient Love or Ancient Sex, and they would talk about that in each like ancient society, and like the Egyptians would like paint that shit on their wall. But I digress. Go on.
but I mean, like as a side, how many people in ancient Egyptian culture, for example, were lining up along the pyramid walls, wanking off? Or, you know what I mean? Like today, we have unbelievable options for sexual exploration and just, you know, on the internet or whatever. That back then, even though like maybe there were some like graphic depictions on the wall or on some kind of like scroll that most people didn't have access to, that existed, but it was just still, it was so rare. So my concept, the reason why the way I'm going with this is human sexuality was repressed for so many tens of thousands of years. I don't think that like look at like, for
the
example,
Romans would disagree with you.
Okay, well the Romans caught up with us. The Romans made up the difference because they had all kinds of crazy sex. But before that, there were so many thousands of years of humans, a sect or a culture or whatever, some tribe, males who did not get to procreate with females because there aren't enough females who will mate with them. So they have to go out and create wars and shit to get out that angst in some other way. So I think of the same thing with pornography, where it's like, yeah, like imagine how many thousands of years of men or women, even women, like masturbation was evil. Masturbation was against Christianity or whatever religion they followed. They couldn't do that. They didn't have access to going out to a bar and hooking up with somebody. So maybe the fact that they were chasing, like modern people chase sex so much, that is not reflective of what the past was like. And maybe in the past, because that sexual repression happened, that's why we had these stories of succubus and incubi or whatever, like going after men and women. So imagine for thousands of years, people didn't have that ability or that belief or that just drive or desire to even try to do that. They would have crazy sex dreams about all kinds of things. And if they believed in religion, if they were really subscribed to it's like, say, the Christian faith, they would come up with these stories of,
because they felt bad.
Yeah, they felt bad.
Bad.
It must have been the demon who was influencing me. Yeah, exactly.
Right, right. Okay.
I wanked off in my dreams last night. So, why did you wank off your dreams? That's evil. Oh, it must have been a demon. You know, like it's like
it was a demon. The demon wanked off. It was a succubus. I swear.
What a shitty life for humans.
I know.
God damn it.
I know. And speaking of the Incubus and Succubus, the earliest writings of that two demons specifically date as far back to Mesopotamia, around 2400 BC.
Of course they do. Were they masturbating in 2400 BC? I doubt it. They were too busy making
the Assyrian Empire.
Read scroll. Yeah.
They're too busy killing each other.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of like a human pastime.
I can't masturbate. I'm cutting some kid's head off and rolling it down the temple stairs. I'm too busy.
Yeah, gotta give it to the succubus. Gotta give it to Lilith.
Oh my god!
I think we ragged on the hag for a while. I wanted to talk about.
We are creating a T-shirt for our podcast called "Rag on the Hag." Patent pending.
Rag on the hag.
Rag on the hag. That's our coffee mug. Rag on the hag.
Rag on the hag. I wanted to talk about night terrors, and I don't know. Have you ever had night terrors? And
what do you define as night terrors?
So night terrors to me is like you have these really bad dreams to the point where you're like, it's like physically manifesting.
You're sweating.
you're like actually screaming in your sleep. You're like whimpering and stuff like that. Have you ever had instances of that, or like really, really bad nightmares?
I have never had an instance where I've like weeped or were like crying in my sleep, but I will say one crazy thing about my experiences with sleep is I used to have way more examples or just instances of sleep paralysis. I used to have times where I would start falling asleep and I would feel like I would wake up semi-conscious while I was falling asleep and be unable to move. And in that moment, I felt compelled with my own psychological awareness of my existence. I need to wake up because if I don't wake up and I drift into sleep, I will die. So I've had that crazy experience many times where I'm drifting off to sleep. I half wake up, I can't move my body at all, and I feel like I need to force myself to move and come back to reality, or I will die forever. And of course, that's not true. Yet, most times when I experienced that, I still believed it. Yet, I'm sure there were plenty of times where I actually did fall asleep and I didn't die, obviously. And not only that, I've also had experiences where I've had sleep paralysis. I wake up, I can't move, I see like a fucking frying pan spider coming down over my body. And then I jolt myself awake a minute later, 60 seconds later, can't find a giant spider anywhere. So it must have been some kind of sleep paralysis dream. So I have had them. Do I believe any of them are real or the result of a demon? Absolutely not. I think it is purely psychological. And I think as I get older, I think that my brain understands and knows that. So I've had those experiences less and less. But I will say what I have had for the last 2 years since I've had my daughter are dreams that are really terrifying in the sense that I have the worst possible dream you could possibly imagine happening to someone you love or some close one or even yourself. And just waking up in complete awareness, completely being awake and unable to fall back asleep, even if I only slept for like an hour or two. And here's the craziest thing about those experiences. Most of the time when I have those dreams or those nights, the night before for dinner, I had like a giant fucking steak dinner or some massive amount of red meat. And I personally think that, I don't know if this is true for everybody, but for me, if I have a huge amount of red beef or red meat or something like that, I tend to have these dreams more often. So I don't know what that means physiologically, but that's just me sharing my experience. So I'll toss it back over to you. Have you had anything recently as an adult that kind of reflects this idea that there are like night terrors or something supernatural going on?
I do get night terrors sometimes. And the most recent one I had was, once again, watching The Nun. This dream was really fucking weird, dude. So it happened like in the dream, I was laying down on my back in my bedroom. There were these hooded like monk figures. I couldn't see their faces because their hoods were up and they were like holding me down. Each one had like an arm and a leg, so I couldn't move. And then whatever, the nun character was like like an inch away from my face, fucking screaming at me.
Oh shit.
Like screaming in my face. And then I don't know how I woke up, but I like screamed in my sleep and my wife was still awake and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I guess. What's weird is that when I have those night terrors where like I'll scream in my sleep or something like that, they don't happen often, but when they do, I don't remember it. And I don't know why it happens. It was really weird. It's recent.
You sound like the most interesting man in the world. I don't always scream in my sleep, but when I do,
I prefer to be yelled at by the. I prefer to be held down and yelled at. That sounds weird. No, but seriously, man, like that dream or night terror, nightmare, whatever the fuck you want to call it, that one stuck with me. But all the other ones where my wife would say like, "Oh, you made this weird sound in your sleep," or "You like screamed in your sleep," like I don't fucking remember. Like I don't know. I don't
Do
know.
you remember how many times you've dreamt like this where you didn't watch a scary movie? Like, is this something that happens often?
Dude, I watch scary movies galore. That's my fucking thing.
That's
Like
that's not a
I'm one of those
control.
No, yeah, I love horror movies. I love that shit. Like, dude, I go to sleep
Yeah.
watching like
Oh my
horror
god.
TV shows and
Well, there you go.
haunting and all that crap. I've always done that since I was a teenager. And I've never had that issue.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so
That's a good perspective.
it is weird. I think that it's probably psychological because you ingrain all that shit into your subconscious. It's going to manifest itself one way or the other. I don't know. For the sake of it, maybe it was paranormal. I don't want it to be, but yeah.
I don't think it was. I think that there are probably so few, if there are any demons or spirits, there are so few of them that can actually interact with our world that it can't possibly be the billions of people who are reporting these experiences for numbers of years. I think that, like anything else in human nature, it's like, 9 out of 10 times it's your own fucking human nature experience. But with that said, like anything else we talk about on our podcast, that it's like that 90%, that, or like that 10%, that 1 out of 10 times where it's like, this doesn't really line up with the rest of our narrative in existence. So I feel like if there was a subsect or an existence of demons or aliens or cryptids or whatever, they would live in that 10%. And maybe they would do that intentionally, but at the same time, maybe they would just be like, that would just be the fact of nature and how things are weighed. So I don't think personally, thankfully, I never experienced. And one thing we never really got to talk about because we're running out of time, but I'll just touch on briefly. In Hawaii, I remember before I moved to Hawaii, I heard this story on, I think it was, strangely enough, it was History Channel talking about like ghosts or spirits or something and sleep paralysis. They talked about the story about like Native Hawaiian spirit choking people in their sleep. And that really stuck with me because they showed unfortunately it's really bad, but like in the show, they showed like a translucent Hawaiian man in traditional garb choking somebody. And that just sits with me really wrong because like Hawaiian people catch enough shit in general. But apparently they're called the Mu or Mo or something like that. MO''O. So apparently they're like lizard-like spirits or guardians even, and they're considered lizard people. They're considered Hawaiian deities in the mythology, but apparently they're, for the most part, they're devious and they're malevolent and they're restless. And they show up in Hawaii where they like will choke, or they will try to choke somebody in their sleep. The person will wake up, be paralyzed, feel their throat being choked, unable to breathe, and they'll open their eyes and see this Native American lizard spirit standing over them trying to choke them. But here's the crazy thing. This is in line with the Scandinavian folklore spirit, which is like, like I said, tens of thousands, like 5,000, 6,000 miles away. The mare or the merveret, which is a malevolent spirit who rides on the chest of people. And I think you said earlier on, like another spirit from other cultures, a completely different part of the world, they sit on people's chests while they sleep.
Yeah, in China, and it's the same in Japan and in other countries as well. It's the same constant similarity that they all share, that it's pressure on the chest, something sitting, feels like that it's sitting on your chest.
So I guess the question then is, and this is the hard question for a podcast that's supernatural, what do we want to believe? Do we want to believe that these spirits transcend different cultures and actually do affect people in the same way? Or is it more likely that human beings are the same across different cultures because we're all hereditarily the same and we have the same inputs and outputs and we experience the same thing? And therefore we came up with the same stories about this feeling where we wake up and something is on our chest. You know what I mean? Like, it's so hard to say one way or the other.
I think that it's probably, I'm going to go the tinfoil route.
Yes.
I'm going to go with, because we've been analytical and ripping shit apart and trying to be objective. We're trying to get better at being believers. But the whole concept of talking about this stuff in general is creepy in itself, because you never know, dude. You could go to bed tonight and experience one of these type of things, which I don't think you want to, but that's always within the realm of possibility.
But you know, if I did though, I'm going to be the asshole. If I did, it would scare the shit out of me in the moment, but I would probably, if I survived, look back on it and be like, oh, it probably happened because I had this podcast conversation with my friend today about all these different malevolent spirits. And the fact that I had a one-off, even though I haven't had this experience for like years. Dude, I went down to my kitchen like 2 months ago and it was pitch black in the kitchen. And I was walking through the open entryway into the kitchen. And I saw these two giant glowing eyes staring at me for a split second, looking right at me.
Mothman.
It could have been like if I didn't know any better, if I just like blipped out of existence in that moment, I could have argued like, yeah, that looked like the Mothman. Because in that moment, for those 2 split seconds, it looked like some giant creature hovering over me from like 12 feet away. You know what it was? It was the light shining through my kitchen window onto my refrigerator, which has 2 handles, and the lights were reflecting from the top of the handles on the refrigerator, and the dark silhouette that looked like a human being and like a human outline head was fucking me because there was a light behind me. So like I literally scared the shit out of myself. And I believed for 2 seconds that there was a 12-foot creature standing in my kitchen, but it was just my refrigerator. So like, and I don't believe in that shit, but like, that for a split second, I believed it. So like, who knows, man? Like it's either one way or the other. It's terrifying in the moment, but after the fact, if you survive, there's always reflection.
I'm going to put you on the spot here.
All right.
Let's say hypothetically, you get sleep paralysis and you get the old hag or the lizard people from Hawaii. And, you know, you wake up, you see it, you feel the pressure, yada, 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 the experience is over, right? And then you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, that was a weird fucking dream. And then like you look down on your person and you see like scratches on you or some sort of mark on you that indicates something happened. And it's not from your wife or anything like that. Let's say hypothetically you're by yourself.
Well, my wife has tried to choke me out in the middle of the night before, so I don't know, man.
It's probably deserved, but seriously,
No.
let's say you were like, your family's out of town, you go through sleep paralysis, you're like, whatever, like me and Chris just talked about this fucking thing on the show, it was probably my imagination. Then you wake up, you're all home alone, and you like look in the mirror and you got like a fucking giant scratch on your chest that's like, not on your chest, like across your back, a big ass scratch across your back that's like, holy fuck, what was that? How would you feel in that moment? And would that change your perception of things?
The first,
I know it's kind of far-fetched, but
no, it's not. It's not. The first thing I would do would be to, if it was a bruise on my throat or on my chest, I would take my own hand and I would measure it up to that scratch or that bruise and see, could I possibly have hit myself in this, closed fist capacity? Could I possibly grab my own neck? Would the scratches on my neck and the bruise marks match up with my own fingers? And if it didn't, I would quit my job and move us to fucking Virginia again. I would move back home. I would sell this goddamn house. This is a new house. They're not supposed to be any evil spirits in this new house. There's a new house that's not supposed to have any evil spirits. I would sell this goddamn house and I would move back to Virginia. No, seriously though, I think that even like I would have to have some irrefutable proof, like, there was no way for me to reach back and scratch myself in the exact same spot that I have a scratch. And even my wife, like if she was next to me, if her fingers didn't match up with that scratch, then I would believe. I would absolutely believe. But if it turned out that like my fist matched up with that punch mark or like puncture or scratch, then I would be like, oh, okay, my dumb ass is just, being a human being and I'm doing this shit to myself like everybody else, like everybody other person doing shit to themselves. I'm doing it to myself.
That makes complete sense. Don't worry, people. I'm trying to break them. We'll get them. We'll get them.
Show me the proof. I was in Indonesia years ago. I think it was like 2013 or 2012. And I really wanted to see a ghost. I really did.
Out of all fucking places, you want to see a ghost in Indonesia. What the hell?
Listen, I had 2 stories told to me when I was there that were secondhand encounters. So in this time period in like 2012, 2013, I had someone tell me one of these stories. And it was basically, I had like this person had a dream about this queen of the southern sea that they call in Indonesia, the queen of the southern sea. And I think in Indonesian it's called Ratu Pantal Selatan or something like that. And Selatan, I think, means sea. But essentially, it's a mythical creature that comes from maritime folklore. And what this queen of the southern sea does is lure men, handsome men, to their death in the sea. And what she does is she goes into their dreams and she entices them with love and riches and like this ultimately great, beautiful life.
Joke's on you, bitch. I got gills.
Except a lot of these men didn't have gills because she would lure them into the Javanese Sea and they would drown, and then she would eat their bodies or whatever she would do with these bodies. She would basically promise them false hope, like love, pleasure, treasure. And these men would go and try to swim to the deepest depths in this trance and just end up drowning. But this guy told me he had this story like not long before I met him. He's like, a couple years ago, I had this story about this woman came to me in my dream and she was so beautiful. She sang this song and I was so in love with her, like beyond love. And I feel like so many people have had these dreams where we meet people who we love and we want to know them. We want to be in relationships with them. Typically people dream these like before they actually meet someone they fall in love with. But it's something that is in human culture. So it's not outside the realm of possible that this guy was telling the truth. But the twist in it is that he had a strong desire to go swimming in the sea. He's like, I had such a strong will, strong desire to go jump in the ocean, but I don't know how to fucking swim. So imagine that. Imagine you're a person who doesn't know how to swim, but you have a dream that is compelling you based off of a beautiful woman to go jump in the ocean or jump in some body of water and try to swim. That is kind of terrifying. Like if you knew how to swim and you had that dream, you'd be like, oh, fuck you, that's stupid. But the fact that the guy had a subconscious desire to swim and he didn't know how to swim, huge. And you can comment on that in a second. But the second story I'll tell real quick too is this story about these little creatures who live in trees in Indonesia. They make sounds and throw shits at cars. But like I remember standing outside in the street at like 11 in the morning or 11 at night rather. And I remember hearing this noise and rustling in one of the trees. And I looked up and I only saw one tree shaking in the wind. And there were like 12 other trees within like 100-foot radius of that tree. And none of them were shaking. And it would be really, really hard for someone to hide up in that tree or climb up and hide in it and shake it. So that is the second story in Indonesian culture that really freaked me out. I never actually ended up seeing one of the white children creatures that they talked about. But when I was on that trip, I really did want to see a ghost because I wanted to believe. However, I will say that I never, ever saw a spirit or a ghost or a sea wench or queen or whatever. In our final time together, I will ask you, Chris, have you ever experienced any like questionable sightings or ghosts or spirits that just makes you flabbergasted to this day?
So I will say this. I haven't had anything pop up to me and say, Chris, I'm a Civil War ghost. No.
Oh, we'll win them yet, people. See, it goes both ways. It goes both ways.
No, but honestly, I notice, this is just for me, I notice like things out of the corner of my eye, shadows that'll pass by really quickly. It happens to me all the time. It's just something I see in my peripherals. It's like really quick. It's like just like a quick like black flash type of thing. It happens to my sister. It happens to my mom. My cousins experience it. It's kind of a weird thing. For me, my ghost experiences have been more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not audio, but I guess audible.
Mm-hmm.
It's more so been on the noise front. My sister has seen things. Yeah. My sister's the one, when we lived in that haunted house, that saw stuff. She saw the ghost of the little kid that looked like he was dressed from the early 20th century. But thankfully, I've never seen anything like that. I've had things like shadows out of the corner of my eyes. I've heard like my name called, footsteps, all that other stuff, but I've never seen anything like manifest in front of me, nor do I want to.
That's interesting that you don't want to, because so you are religious in a sense that like you believe in the other side, you believe that there are spirits who are looking out for you, taking care of you, and as long as you follow a certain set of guidelines and whatever, they'll protect you, but you're still curious about the other side. So that I think that's interesting to me. Like why, like before we close out, I will ask you why, what is it about seeing that, if you believe it's real, if you believe spiritually, religiously, and even circumstantially that other people have experienced it, why is it so scary to you to experience something like that? Just an honest question.
Honestly, it's my own fear, because
You're being attacked by it, or attached by it,
I would
it,
say
okay.
like attachments and,
Okay.
you know, probably being attacked by it. And this ties back to the whole sleep paralysis stuff. The people that experience that stuff and they see these things, you're fucking terrified and you don't want to see them, because, you know, I like going down like Reddit rabbit holes and reading these stories, and they posted a story that they have sleep paralysis and this thing like comes to them every night and attacks them, and to the point where they don't sleep at night. They just sleep during the day with their lights on, and they have their shades open and all the time. Like there have been accounts of people that have been physically attacked by this stuff. So to tie it back to your question and my answer, yeah, it's possibly like a fear thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It's
because
dangerous.
you don't want anything to be attached to you. You don't want to see anything creepy, anything of that sort, you know? It's kind of like
get a good night's sleep.
yeah, you want to get a good night's sleep, and on top of that, you would just want to keep this as, you know, like a fun hobby where you speculate about this stuff.
Right.
Because I don't know, man, it's one of those things. If you saw, I don't know if you played Baldur's Gate, if you saw like the equivalent of like a tiefling, you know, standing in your fucking doorway, I don't think, you know, you'd be too thrilled about that. But with regards to faith, I think it's more so a set of guidelines and common sense more than anything else.
Yeah.
You don't provoke these things. You don't call on these things. You don't invite these things in, because my mom always says that, yeah, these things are there, but just remember that God is always more powerful, and never invite these things into your spiritual space.
See, that's what's fascinating to me is I am not inherent, like I'm not purely.
You almost said it.
I almost said it. Fucking. I am not inherently a Christian. I grew up Christian. However, I understand the Christian faith, but I'm not myself Christian. I'm not Buddhist. I'm not whatever one religion. I will say that is something that I've thought about, even though I'm not religious, is if you believe in a divine being that is benevolent, all-powerful, omnipresent, omniscient, everywhere, anywhere, can completely control, is at the end of the day, at the end of existence, in control of everything and anything, then it doesn't matter what you experience, no matter how much pain or fear or doubt or uncertainty. That good thing which you subscribe yourself to has a plan. Even if you experience the worst thing in your life, when you pass away, you will contribute to that experience, to the grand scheme of existence and awareness and international or universal consciousness or whatever. As much as it would suck to be a human being, to experience those things and be stuck with them, you could always fall back on this idea like, wow, I experienced life and I got to be alive and I got to contribute to the universal consciousness of existence. So that's what always blew my mind, that someone would be kind of like,
even though you kept getting fucked up by a hag.
Right? I know, like, but it's kind of like that. It's like, you know you're going to get fucked, but at the same time, at the end of the day, after existence is done in 1,000,000 years from now, when humans are not around anymore, because we will have either evolved, we will have died out, or we will have transcended to another plane of existence. None of this shit will matter. So, I mean, that to me is the more terrifying part of humanity and existence, is maybe something that we get screwed over for now in our tiny, minuscule lives really won't matter in the grand scheme of existence, and we will have just suffered really shitty, minuscule lives. And that is to me way worse than getting stuck with a demon and having some god take care of you afterward, than it is to have some demon fuck you for the rest of your life and not have anything happen after.
And remember, folks, don't forget to rag on the hag.
Rag on the hag.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of The Wandering Road. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, and most podcast platforms. Be sure to subscribe and share. Also, don't forget to give a follow on Instagram at twroadpodcast and follow my TikTok at twrpodcast. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.